Last night I did a repotting workshop with the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, and to my surprise when I arrived, they had the Lee, Wisconsin sphagnum moss. So I thought I'd do a short video about the moss because this is what we used. And I didn't buy supplies for the repotting workshop. I had the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory do it, and this is what they came with. So, showed up, there was a bag of this that had already been pre-soaked in water. It was completely wet, and so I'm just going to talk about how I dried it out, and then we repotted a bunch of Phalaenopsis with it. And first thing I want to show is that this is what it looks like out of the bag. It has like the cranberry vine in it, and it's not as long grain, even though it says that it's long fibered sphagnum moss. It's not nearly as long grained as the stuff that I got directly from the president of Lee. So that's in this bag. So this is what I got from him that he gave me. And this stuff, which you can see is shorter fiber, is what came out of the commercially bought bag. So when I showed up, the moss was in a pot, not a pot, a bucket that was full of water, and it was it was completely soaked. And also I was told by the president of Lee that the Wisconsin sphagnum moss holds 60% or 60 times more water than the Chilean, and so we don't want to pot with that. So the first thing I did was I would take out the moss that was in the bucket, and then I squeezed all the water out of it until it looked like this. And you notice that when I do that, it gets kind of compressed. So the first thing I had to do was basically break up the clumps that are caused by me squeezing it together so that it's this sort of damp but fluffy mass. And I actually learned this sort of repotting technique, where I didn't learn it, I was doing it this way, but I attended a virtual Zoom orchid show where the woman who owns Orchid File was giving a talk about using sphagnum moss to pot, and she basically does it like this as well. And so her talk's really good, but she explains that you want to have the moss in such a way that there's spring to it, so that you don't overpack it when you put it in the pot. So now you can see that the moss is sort of lighter and fluffier. I just break out up all the clumps. You don't want to pot it with clumps, because when that clump dries, it's not going to intake water as well. It's going to be resistant to taking in water in the clump. So you want it to be all broken up, nice and fluffy like this. And I went ahead and just used it with the cranberry vine in it. So this stuff, I just left it in there. I didn't worry about it. I know people have complained that they've bought the Lee moss and it's dirty, but really, you know, we are putting these orchids in things with bark and tree fern and charcoal. So, you know, quote, we're adding, you know, stuff to the mix anyway. This is not pure. And so this is just going to make it more airy. And quite clearly, you know, it's not going to decompose that fast, or we'll find out. So we had a whole bunch of crappy Phalaenopsis, and or like ones that, you know, they were done blooming, some sunburn. One of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory donated a bunch of Phalaenopsis for the workshop, and I like to just go ahead and put all the roots in the pot to start the Phalaenopsis in an easy way for me to take care of at the office. One of the things I like to say is that the pot is for you. The pot's not for the orchid. This wants to grow on a tree branch or on the trunk of a tree, and it doesn't need a pot. The pot's so that when you water it in your house, you don't get water everywhere. So I just start the roots off inside, even if they are aerial roots. And then I very gently put in springy moss around. Don't know if people can see it with the sun. So I'm just tucking it in gently, and I'm not packing it in super tight. So I want it in tight enough so that, you know, if I turn the orchid like this, it doesn't fall out. Oops, like that. So that's not tight enough. Actually, now I have to redo it. Oh my gosh, I just broke off the new growth. Hopefully I didn't just top this orchid. So I'm just gently pressing it in. And I'm not pressing in really hard, so you can see that when I press it, there's a lot of give to it, so it's not in very tight. I'm just pressing it in so it gets down to the roots at the bottom of the pot. I'm just putting all the loose stuff in. Up, adjust it a little bit so it's evenly on both sides, and so now it's just firm, right? So if I go like this, it doesn't come out. It's not tightly packed. I have not jammed the sphagnum moss in here, and this is basically how Orchid File says you should use long grain New Zealand sphagnum moss, but this is how I use all sphagnum moss. So it's potted, and we'll see how it does since I just broke off the new growth on it. So I'll try to remember to do an update on this poor thing that I've just horribly abused. But that was the repotting workshop. So I just got, 20 people to use the Wisconsin sphagnum moss for their Phalaenopsis orchids in Oak Park.